Good morning and welcome to the 11th meeting of the Education, Children and Young People Committee in 2025. The first item on our agenda today is to take evidence on the promise. Can I first of all note that we have apologies from Keith Brown, MSP, and Ros McCall is joining us this morning. For our evidence session, we have Natalie Dawn-Innes, Minister for Children, Young People and the Promise, Gavin Henderson, Deputy Director, Keeping the Promise, and Iona Colvin, Chief Social Work Advisor. Minister, I understand you'd like to make an opening statement. Over to you.
Thank you, Convener. I'd really first like to start by thanking you for the opportunity to attend the committee today. I really welcome the committee's ongoing engagement and support on the work underway across Scotland to keep the promise by 2030. The Scottish Government is committed to lead from the front to make national changes that will be felt by the care community at a local level. As the recent Oversight Board report identified, the promise is on course and can still be kept by 2030 if everyone involved plays their part and works together constructively with children and their families. The Scottish Government is making progress, and through the detailed review of the implementation plan published last September, I hope the committee will have been reassured by the breadth of actions underway. Delivery of the promise is, though, a Scotland-wide goal, and it's only through local partners that change will truly be felt. I sit here in no doubt, however, that there is a lot more to be done, and there are a number of challenges to be overcome to get there. The cross-parliament commitment that was confirmed during the debate in November is key to ensuring that we work together to ensure politics doesn't get in the way of delivering on the change required. To help us all, nationally and locally, to achieve this, it is essential that we can fully understand the progress that is being made across the country. The Oversight Board report has provided a high-level view, but I know and have seen first-hand through visits to projects and programmes, through conversations with care-experienced children, young people, adults and families, and through engagement with carers and the hard-working workforce across the public and the third sector, that there is a lot of good work underway and the commitment is strong. To assist with this further, I've asked the Promise Scotland to provide a picture of the activity underway in localities across Scotland and present their insights into what is happening. Fraser McKinlay has written to me recently to confirm that this work is underway and will be provided by the end of April. This picture will be instrumental in capturing the progress that I've seen is underway on the ground and what and where the focus of our collective attention over the next 5 years needs to fall. I'm clear, though, that progress through national indicators is not enough. Change must be felt by our care experience community. I know, and many of you who were at the recent reception will know, will also have spoken to members of the care experience community who have felt things that have changed. It is our collective responsibility to be balanced and to recognise success to date, as well as what more has to be delivered in the years to come. The Promise Progress Framework, published in December, provides the basis for how we can consistently report on national data. It brings together for the first time over 50 national data indicators that inform the picture of outcomes for children and young people with care experience. And the next stage of this work is to tell the stories of change. As recognised as early as 2022 in the first iteration of our implementation plan, there is a place for legislation to support the change required, and I will bring forward a bill this year setting out key provisions that will increase the supports available to children, young people, adults and carers. The committee will recognise and respect that I am limited in how much further I can add at this stage prior to the legislation being agreed through the formal Cabinet process. Chair, please let me thank you again for the opportunity to provide you with an update on progress on the promise. And finally, I want to say that we have an opportunity to work together to ensure that the promise is kept. As Minister for Children and Young People, and with the full support of the First Minister and the Cabinet, I am committed to leading the change required, and I welcome the committee's role in providing the appropriate level of challenge and support.
Thank you very much, Minister. I heard what you said about the difficulties you may have on the proposed legislation, but we are the committee that will be scrutinising that bill. I think it's important that not just this committee but Parliament is better informed of the timeframe. So where are we with the bill, the Promise Bill, and when will Parliament see it?
Well, the member will be aware that there was a number of consultations underway in previous years to help inform the direction of the bill. Some of those only closed as recently as February. So those consultation the consultation responses are being analysed, and they are going to help inform the direction of the bill. I'm unable to provide any formal sort of or tell you the exact timetable at the moment, but I really want to assure you that we are working at pace to present this as soon as possible.
Well, without a specific date, give us a rough area when we can expect it.
I can't really give you a rough date. I am hoping to introduce prior to recess, but as I say, prior to summer recess, but that would be dependent on the agreement by Cabinet and that Cabinet process. So that, as I say, that is my own personal where I want to introduce the bill and where I feel that it needs to be introduced in terms of the timetabling for the rest of the parliamentary term. I've been very clear that I want this bill introduced and through the parliamentary process in this parliamentary term.
Well, not only you, but I mean the programme for government said that.
Well, of course,
as well. It was very clear, and we are now in the final year of this session, and there is a growing concern, both within this building, I believe, and out with, that there is not going to be sufficient time to scrutinise this bill. You say before the summer recess. That would allow you, on the last day that we sit before the summer recess, to lodge that bill. Do you understand it has to be well before the summer recess, so we as the committee that will be scrutinising it have time to sort out evidence sessions and hear from people who want to input into this bill?
Yes, Mr Ross, I'm fully aware of the process, and I understand the timings are concerned. I appreciate it's a concern. I've been very clear both in my engagement with other MSPs. I mean, I did invite all the other party reps to discuss the Promise Bill with me, to get an idea of their priorities for the bill. I've been quite open about the bill. I appreciate that we have an urgency here in terms of timing, but I do believe that...
Are you 75% of the way there, 90% of the way there, 50% of the way there? You're speaking about a consultation that only closed last month. That sounds to me like that's going to delay things further. Are you just on the edge of being able to submit it, or do you believe there's still significant work that you and the Cabinet have to do before it can be submitted? There
is work still underway, of course.
So give us a ballpark.
I can't give you a percentage of how we are, because we are dealing with legal matters. We have to. There are processes in place for bills to be, for legislation to be written. I will perhaps bring my official Gavin in if he can add anything to this.
So, Mr Henderson, what I'm looking for is the bill roughly there and you're 10% away from putting the finishing touches on it, or are you a long way off and it will be more likely that we as a Parliament will get it just before we then all go on a summer recess, and therefore our opportunity to scrutinise it won't actually start until September? Because that's a fear that I'm now picking up from the Minister.
Said, we absolutely respect the committee's role in giving proper scrutiny to legislation, understanding the process of, what you're alluding to, convener, is us introducing the bill with sufficient time for meetings of this committee in advance of summer recess to do call for evidence. Yeah. We completely understand that. And of course, from the committee's perspective, we can understand that being able to go straight into stage one and evidence sessions immediately after summer recess would greatly enhance the time available for scrutiny.
Could I just be clear as well? This is not just for the committee. We will meet as and when we need to, but there are people out there at the moment who are waiting for this bill and are getting equally frustrated that it seems to be continually delayed and pushed back and back and back. And I'm not getting much reassurance today that that's not happening. But my question to the Minister, which she put to you, Mr Henderson, was quite specific. How far down the line of building this bill and getting ready to present it are you?
So the bill is quite well developed.
75%, 90%?
So I wouldn't like to put a percentage on. I don't think that's a fair thing to do. But you can understand the process that we would require to go through in order to have Cabinet agreement and the pre-introduction checks with the
sorry,
Parliament.
Mr Henderson, this is not the first bill the Scottish Government or the Education Department have ever come up with. So you've known about this, you know about the processes, you know that it has to go through Cabinet committees, you know the timetable within Parliament, legislation, teams both within Government and Parliament. Nothing about this should be a shock to you. So why are we still here unable to tell this committee and Parliament as a whole, and people who are genuinely worried that we are going to run out of time to properly scrutinise it when we're even going to see it?
Mr.
I don't think that would have been... Sorry, Minister, just before I bring you back in. I don't think it would have been a difficult question to predict that you were going to get from this committee today, looking at the promise, that we would want to know a little bit more about the promise bill. And you have told us nothing.
I have not told you nothing. I think to say that it's been pushed back is unfair. For example, the foster care consultation, which closed in February, MSPs across the Parliament have been aware that that consultation was open for that length of time. They were aware it was closing in February. I have made it very clear that that was part of the work that would inform the bill. There was no way that it could have been brought forward prior to that. I am trying to cover all areas that I believe are important to people for the Promise Bill. I've been very open that I will be introducing a Promise Bill, and I am hoping that that is enough reassurance. I very much understand the process. I understand the committee needs time to scrutinise, and I, of course, want to give the committee time to do so. But it is, as members have alluded to before, it is a wide-ranging bill with consultations which have only recently closed. We are working at pace to get this over the line.
Okay, on that point, is it just the fostering consultation that you were waiting for, and a chunk of that work had already been done, and this just gets added onto it? And that's what I'm trying to understand. You know, what stage are you at? How much has been done? How much is ready to go? And what needs to be added into it between now and the summer recess?
I'm not really sure what more I can give you, Mr Ross, because there are some aspects of the bill. Well, for example, take children's hearings redesign. It's an extremely complex area of legal matters. We are still working them through with law officers and drafting the bill itself.
But they were not subject to the consultation that just closed in February. So
no,
they were not delayed.
But they were subject to the consultation that closed, I think, October last year or last year. So there has been a number more months to do so, but it is a more complex area. So I would say, as I say, I can't put percentages on it, but I am very confident that I have made a number of decisions that are going to form part of the bill. There are still some areas that we are looking to explore that I know are important to people, and we're trying to get it right for the people that it matters to.
So has it always been the intention to present the bill just before summer recess, or has it slipped at all?
I don't believe it has slipped.
Because some of the people I've met about the Promise Bill expected it just after the Easter recess, which we're going into next week.
Okay, well, that has not been raised with me. I have not had that discussion.
So the timetable for the Scottish Government has always been before the summer recess?
I never set it in stone of when the timetable would be. The timetable is aligned with the appropriate content being in the bill. So I never set a definitive timeline other than ensuring that we have enough time for the bill to go through committee scrutiny in the parliamentary process, which I believe it will do if it is introduced, as I've said.
Okay, I had a few other things I wanted to speak about, but we've taken 13 minutes to try and find out when we're getting the bill, and I'll move on to other members and hopefully have time to come back to my points. George Adam.
Good morning. Minister, one of the things you said during your opening remarks was the fact that it's down to us all and the various stakeholders and everywhere else to try and deliver this. And the initial question I'd like to ask is, how is the Scottish Government engaging with the Promise Progress framework, and is this engagement ongoing?
Sorry, Mr Adam, could you say that again? How are we engaging with the Promise?
The Promise Progress framework, and is this engagement ongoing?
Oh, absolutely. As I said in my statement, the Promise Progress Framework, I was very keen to see this launched. I believe this is a key way that we're going to... One of the things that gets brought to me on a regular occasion by MSPs from across the Parliament is around how we are measuring the progress. And I think the Promise Progress Framework is a really key... is absolutely key in terms of us measuring the progress that we're making. So we will be continuing to engage with COSLA, with other stakeholders, to ensure that the data that requires to be in that framework is set out and is updated at a regular regular periods to ensure that progress is an accurate reflection of what is happening in Scotland.
Minister, you mentioned during your opening remarks as well that the framework consolidates 50 different national data streams now. That's quite a bit. So how do you manage to be able to be flexible and take all that data on board and make that as part of the delivery process for the promise itself?
Well, I think this is something that I do on a daily basis anyway, Mr Adam. I think the progress framework is now being set out for organisations, for politicians, for care experienced people to be able to view and see an accurate record of the progress that's being made. So I don't think this has necessarily changed anything in terms of the areas that are being dealt with or the focus for specific areas where further change is required. I think it's just, as I say, really key in reflecting that progress.
Okay, and as information comes in from this data and the framework and the work continues with stakeholders, how does the government plan to evolve the framework while addressing some of the issues that might be coming up through the process? Is there a flexibility there for you to be able to do it? You might say that's what you're already doing again.
Yeah, I'll maybe bring Gavin in a second, but as I said, so we're going to be making sure that this data is updated on a regular basis to ensure that it's an accurate reflection of what's happening at that time. In terms of how that will be done, I'm not sure if, Gavin, you could add anything to that?
Yeah, so the Promise Progress Framework was agreed across a number of stakeholders, including COSLA and the Promise Scotland, and is intended to be a clear set of statements and outcomes with indicators which will help us track delivery of the promise overall. And from that perspective, Mr Adam, the idea is that we are clear what the goal is we're trying to achieve collectively. And therefore are able to be quite transparent about the progress that we're making year on year. So the intention is not to change significantly the indicators over that period of time. But of course, these data sets are only the quantitative information, the statistics, the actual experience of children and young people in the care community is another aspect of that, and the relational improvement and difference that is felt is a big part of it. So that's why the next phase of this work is to develop stories of change and the qualitative information about how change is actually being felt, rather than just the kind of high-level statistics.
Yeah, I understand that, but one of the constant kind of things that we get is the fact that COSLA and those that are trying to deliver at a local level always say that they're struggling part of the problem is we're struggling to get it done at a local level. Now, I'm assuming with the data that we're receiving, we should be able to use that and feed it down into a local level where it can be used as a foundation to actually make that delivery.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I've talked about regularly in relation to the promise is inconsistencies across that kind of local picture. We have some fantastic things going on across our local authorities, but we need to ensure that that's spread out. We need to sort of share best practice. So I think one of a number of things, but I think the Promise Progress Framework will be absolutely key in allowing local authorities to see how other areas are doing things and allow them to make that change.
Okay, thank you.
Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Good morning, Minister. I must start by saying I am quite surprised that we can't get more detail on what's in the bill. And I think that people watching this today, care experienced young people and the organisations that have been campaigning for action on the promise for a long time will be, I think, somewhat disappointed to hear the response today. Convener, is it okay if I ask specific questions about the bill itself before I move on to other areas? So this time last year, care experienced young people have told the committee they hadn't seen much change as a result of the promise. And today, we can't tell them what's going to be in the bill on the promise. We've also heard the Oversight Board say the bill could be used as an excuse for delay. What can you say to young people watching this today that can reassure them that anything is progressing and that their rights will be enshrined in some form of legislation?
I can say what I say to them every time that I meet them, that I am committed to bringing forward a promise bill in this parliamentary term, and it will contain issues that that have been brought to me that young people feel need to be changed in order to deliver on the promise. Now, I can speak to the consultations that we've had out, hearings redesign, advocacy, aftercare, foster and kinship care, and the definition of care experience as well. So those were 4 areas that we consulted on that as I said, are informing the bill. There are other areas that have been brought to me by children and young people. As I said, I reached out across party to get an idea of what members' priorities were. I discussed these areas in those meetings. So I find it difficult to hear that people think there will be that this is going to be used as a delay to deliver the promise. As I say, I've been very open, I've been very transparent that a promise bill is coming, but we want to get it right.
But this has been coming for an awful long time. I mean, it predates your own role and several people before you, and young people are still in a situation where their outcomes in education are not the same as people who haven't lived with care experience. Their destinations are not the same. They're still struggling to get housing support. They're still struggling to get through care support and aftercare support, or in fact, lifelong support. Yet, we're still here today with no date for the bill to be published, legitimate and serious concerns that the committee now could face a very short scrutiny timetable, which isn't really how we should be doing legislation as important as this. What's your response to all of that?
As I said, I think there's been, I've made clear, the member, Ms Duncan Glancy says that this predates my time in office. Absolutely, but I couldn't rush those consultations. The hearings redesign was based on that work that was carried out by Sheriff Mackey and by the young people involved in that. That was still ongoing when I came into office. The consultation that then represented those views and asked questions around that is a lengthy process with very complex matters. So I couldn't rush some of that any more or work any faster than that has already than we did. I would say that there has been really positive progress already. You know, I appreciate that there are still things that need to change. I recognise that in my opening statement. But, for example, the passage of the Care and Justice Bill last year was a huge step forward in terms of delivery of the promise. The Scottish Recommended Allowance, the investment into Bairns House. There are a number of things that have happened in this government that help to deliver on the promise. And when people say, you know, young people feel that nothing has changed, I'm sorry if that is the case. And as I say, I engage with young people on a, if not daily, on a weekly basis around the promise. But actually, I think, you know, I hear stories, and I appreciate they don't come into the data sets or the figures in terms of how delivery on the promise is having. But for an example, at the parliamentary reception for the promise, I was speaking to a young girl who was telling me how much she felt change in her experience in care in a residential home. She was telling me things like things had opened up more, that she was allowed a pet, that this home had become more like a family home for her. And as I say, that might not always hit the headlines, but this change is happening on the ground, and I appreciate that not all children and young people might be feeling it, but the steps that we are taking, both through legislative means and through non-legislative means, I believe that children and young people will feel the changes coming.
And I don't, to be honest, I don't doubt your commitment to those examples, and it's helpful to recognise them. But the reality is we still don't have the structural and systemic change that's necessary to affect the amount of change that's needed for these children and young people. And I don't think anyone could use the word rushed when it comes to getting this through. I think it's taken some time. Before I'll finish on this. The Minister mentions Sheriff Mackey's review and other reviews that have all taken time. But the government must have known all these things will take time before they marched young people up the hill to tell them there was going to be a bill. And then years have passed with no significant change in legislation for them. In fact, other opposition members being told that will come in the promise bill or that will come in the promise bill, even when we've tried to amend other bills to ensure rights are protected for care experienced people.
I disagree.
Just don't think it's satisfactory, Minister.
No satisfactory legislative. As I said, the passing of the Children Care and Justice Act was a huge step forward in terms of legislative change. And I think that the young people and the people involved who are watching this will appreciate that while things are taking time, as I've said, it is my priority that we get this right, that we get the right things in the bill, that we make the necessary change. And as it is not just through legislative means that we can make change. I have spoken before around, I mean, there are things that we are doing that are specifically in relation to delivering on the promise that will keep the promise. But there are other wider priorities, such as whole family wellbeing, whole family support, that I think are absolutely fundamental in terms of delivering on the promise. And that perhaps is more in those longer term aims, in terms of shooting prevention, getting into families earlier to prevent those crisis points. But I think that to say that change isn't happening, I think it is a bit unfair. But as I've said, I've recognised that we still have further to go. There are still children and young people who require to feel that change, and that's what I'm committed to doing.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Just before you come back, Ms Duncan-Glancy, I get your clear passion for a piece of legislation. I think, Minister, although we don't have any more detail on it, but you've told us this morning that Cabinet still haven't considered the further details and when it will come. And can I read to you the Scottish Government's response and progress update from just September last year, and just the language. The Scottish Government aims to introduce a promise bill, not will. So there's some ambiguity there. By the end of this parliamentary session, and this is the Scottish Government's language that they inserted, dependent on wider pressures on the parliamentary legislative calendar. Can you understand why, as the Minister unable to give us any firm dates today, people watching this will then look at the Scottish Government's previous commitments and say there are caveats in here that will allow them a get-out clause not to implement this bill?
As I said, I don't think I can give any more assurance. I've not given you a firm date, but I have said that I want this introduced prior to the summer recess.
But, sorry, do you accept your government, in providing an update just last September, use language that will allow them very easily to drop this bill because of wider pressures on the parliamentary legislative calendar, which we all know we get into at this stage of a session? Do you accept that?
I accept that that is the language that was used. But as I've said, I've given very clear assurance in terms of my priority and my, as I say, my priority in terms of introducing this bill.
But you agreed to that? Sorry, can I just check? You agreed to that language being put in there from the government's update in September 2024?
Well, yes, because I can't determine what will happen in a parliamentary calendar. I can't tell what will happen with other legislation or
so there is uncertainty about
opposition requests for statements or time in the chamber that is getting devoted to other things.
So there is uncertainty about this bill now?
I don't believe there is any uncertainty, because I think that we're further on. When Mr Roshi said, I believe that was from September. I think we're further on. We have more of an understanding of the landscape for the for legislation and parliamentary scrutiny going forward. So I don't believe that it's uncertain. I have assured that I will.
You can't give us any more. You say we're further on, but you can't tell us how much further on, because you can't give us any more detail about when we will see this bill, other than it might be just before we go on summer recess.
I have given you the detail that I can give you.
Okay, thank you. Back to Ms Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Convener. I have questions about some specifics in the bill. Does the bill intend, and are you able to share this information with us, to look at the lifelong support that care experienced people need?
Yes, I'm looking into that.
And so the bill could include support for...
It could. Yes, okay. It's something I'm considering at the moment. And again, that's based on a lot of the consultation responses that were received through that specific consultation. But yes, that's something, because I know that the work that has gone underway for that, I know the importance of, I've heard from care experienced people the importance of having that lifelong support, that things can happen later on in life that they might not have considered, that can bring trauma back, that can... So I appreciate that, and it is something that I'm looking at, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then final question on the bill specifically. Will it include anything on virtual schools?
So, if Ms Duncan-Glancy wouldn't mind alluding on that, because I am already aware of the very good work in relation to our virtual school network. I've visited 2 or 3, I think, and I've heard of the really positive outcomes they are having. What is it, Ms Duncan-Glancy, what is it you'd like to see in the bill in relation to that?
I'd hope the bill's slightly further progressed than suggesting new areas to go in it, but something that would put... We used to have 21 virtual schools in Scotland. I think we've got 18 now, yes, so there's a reduction. But they have been shown to be quite successful in terms of care experience outcomes. So it was just about whether or not the Minister felt it would be appropriate to include something on that.
Okay, I would say that's not something that we're looking at for the bill, but that is something that I'm continuing to encourage with local authorities. I raised that exact point myself after my last visit to a virtual school. Why do we not have a virtual school that is accessible for pupils across Scotland? So that's something that I'm actively working on aside of the bill. I don't feel that legislation is necessarily required for that, but do think we can make progress, as I say, proving and showing the outcomes that the virtual school and the virtual head teacher network is having for pupils.
Okay, thank you.
Ross Clear.
Thanks, Convener, and good morning, Minister. Just sticking with the bill briefly in the first instance, could you just confirm, has anything in relation to the bill gone to the Cabinet Subcommittee on Legislation yet, or is it still, are they still awaiting a paper on it before it goes to the Cabinet as a whole?
It's not going to Cabinet Subcommittee on Legislation.
In that case, and I might circle back to the legislation point on this, the Government is taking forward its intention to set up a national social care agency. Could you just clarify what your involvement is in that as the Minister with responsibility for the promise? Obviously, it's primarily been taken forward in another portfolio, but what involvement and engagement do you have in that process?
So that's something I regularly meet with other colleagues around workforce issues. That obviously stretches across several ministerial portfolios. We also have the Cabinet Subcommittee on the Promise, and again that's a kind of cross-government approach in relation to the Promise, and has been discussed at that as well. So I'm actively involved in the discussions around it. It doesn't necessarily sit with me, but I've been very keen on pushing the fact that I'm very understanding that we need to improve, we need to support, we need to grow the workforce, and I believe that the National Social Work Agency is a key part of that. I've been very supportive of that, and as I say, we'll continue to be involved in discussions around that.
Do you know if the key stakeholders in this area, primarily care experienced young people themselves, have been involved in the discussions that the Government's led so far in setting up the social care agency? So it's relatively far advancing. The expectation is still spring next year is when it would actually be set up. But discussions have presumably been underway to do the policy development work ahead of it. Have care experienced young people and other stakeholders in the Promise space been involved in that? So
sorry, I'm not involved in the policy development, so I'll perhaps bring Iona in just to speak to some of the engagement around that.
Yeah, sure. So there's two elements to this. One is the National Social Work Agency itself. So we've been looking at how we involve people with lived experience of social work generally, because it's social work right across the piece. So it's justice, it's adult care, it's mental health care, and it's children and families. And addiction services as well. So we're looking at that just now in terms of, but what we have done is we've all along involved social workers themselves, so the people who are at the front line of delivery of services. So they have, and we've had ongoing, we've got a policy panel that actually connects with frontline social workers. So that work's been going on. We're looking at involving a third sector and the SSC doing some work around how we reach out further. So that's going on. So the agency itself is about how we work across government, how we make sure that all of the policy that government wants to see in place in the legislation can be better supported around implementation, and to do that we'll form a national partnership with COSLA, particularly with Social Work Scotland, but also with SOLAS, and that's about delivery. So it's about translating policy into delivery, making sure that we've got a proper workforce plan, because they don't exist at the moment, because obviously the employers are 32 local government agencies, plus obviously a number in the third sector, particularly in children's services. There are a number of qualified social workers working in the big charities who you heard from a while ago. And so we're all engaged, and there is good support for the creation of the National Social Work Agency and the partnership itself, which will involve local government in that delivery.
Thanks very much. So from what I've heard so far, the engagement with social workers themselves has been really good, and you've confirmed that this morning. But could you just clarify, have care experienced young people been involved in any of the discussions thus far?
Not specifically in relation to the agency yet, but we intend to involve people.
And, I mean, I understand obviously the agency will be a couple of steps removed, but it is important to make sure that all key stakeholders are able to contribute?
It's absolutely important because, I mean, one of the biggest issues is in terms of the workforce, particularly in children's services, is the turnover of social workers. And that, there's recent research to show that very clearly that the more social workers a young person has, a child or a young person has, the worse the outcome. So it's about relationships, it's about having adults that you can trust and that support you and that will advocate for you. So yes, absolutely, it is important and we will engage with them. We've just, in terms of the National Social Work Agency itself, we've been through a bit of a protracted process because it was linked to the National Care Service.
Yes. And just finally, given that originally it was obviously linked to the National Care Service Bill and that bill's changed form quite significantly, are you expecting there to be any need for legislative change in relation to the set-up of the Social Work Agency and how it interacts with care experienced young people, i.e. is there any prospect of anything related to the Social Work Agency coming into the scope of the Promise Bill?
Not that, I mean, I think there will be in terms of social work itself, because obviously if we look at extending rights to support, for example, then we need to think about who's going to provide those rights to support. But the agency itself, no. The agency itself, the legislation is through the Care Reform Act, and that is about establishing the National Chief Social Work Advisor post in statute, and then related to that, the agency.
Thank you. Thanks, Commissioner.
Rennie.
Social work services, just following on from what Ross Greer has said, is the social work experience for care experienced young people just a crisis-only service? In other words, are they only able to do their statutory responsibilities?
I don't believe so. I understand the pressures that the social work workforce is under. We are taking steps to support with that. A number of steps we've already alluded to the National Social Work Agency. I appreciate there may be, I've already spoken about inconsistencies, different experiences for different children and young people, which is something that our work to support the workforce wants to improve.
So the evidence we've had contradicts that.
Okay.
And from very senior people within the social work service, but also care experienced young people. In fact, this very week we had a session with care experienced young people on Monday, and they were telling us about this. So the first one is Ben Farrugia from the Scottish Association of Social Workers, who said, if someone seeks support but they're not in crisis, we cannot get to them. In my own constituency, I had experience of a young man who their family were pleading for a long time for early intervention, and it eventually ended up in crisis and a secure unit because they weren't intervening early enough. Okay. And thirdly, on Monday, we heard that families were encouraged, if the young person had been in crisis but they had moved on from that, the family were encouraged by social workers to say they were still in crisis, even just to get the basic level of support. So that's 3 examples from 3 well-grounded people. So why do you say it's not a problem?
I did not say it was not a problem. I said that I absolutely recognise the pressures that the social work workforce are under, and we are taking steps to try to support them and to try to improve that picture. I'll perhaps bring Iona in a second, but I do want to just speak to some of the things that we are doing to help support. So as I've said, we've already alluded to the National Social Work Agency. We've delivered improvements to funding for student social workers. We're working at pace to deliver a new work-based professional social work qualification for the next academic year, for this academic year 25-26. We are making improvements to the system to support learning and development, and we have implemented a newly qualified supported year for social workers, which has been rolled out, and that is to provide support in that first year and provide help and experience, someone to help and someone with experience to support. So I can allude further on some of those, but that is a kind of high-level overview of some of the steps that we're taking to improve things in the social work workforce. But perhaps Iona could expand on that a little further.
Sure, I recognise what you're saying. There are definitely pressures. There are pressures in relation to resources at times. There's also, we need to remember that the the approach here is about GIRFEC. It's about getting it right for every child at the point of need, and I think that is variable as well. So it shouldn't always have to be social workers who are responding, but it sounds like the cases you are talking about are a high-end level, so should have been involved. So there are pressures. There are also pressures because we have major vacancies in the workforce, particularly in more remote and rural areas. There are very significant challenges around the workforce, and that's because we don't have enough. One, we're not recruiting enough social workers. So what the Minister said there is about the things that we're doing to make sure that the pipeline of social workers is there, coming through the universities, and we're working with the universities through an education partnership to do that. But the other issue is retention, because we know that something like 25% of social workers are leaving after 6 years of qualification. And there's a couple of issues that relate to that. One is immediate vacancies in teams. So I was talking to a Chief Social Work Officer this week who had 40% vacancies in her children and families teams. And the other is the mix of experience. So experienced new social workers learn from their more experienced colleagues, and there is an issue following the pandemic around the mix between the experience and newly qualified social workers coming through. So that's another issue that leads to rationing of social work time. But I would like to say that there's absolute commitment from the social work profession in terms of delivery of the promise. And I think Ben and Alison and others clearly said that when they appeared before you. And that there have been a number of areas which have massively transformed their services, Glasgow being one, for example, North Lanarkshire being another that I can think of. Some of the Ayrshires have done some very impressive work, particularly around the schools and putting social work into the schools and supporting children at an earlier stage. The problem is it's not consistent enough, and that's where the promise framework will help us, because we'll be able to see where it's working well and where it's not working so well. I would be happy to talk to you about the specific examples if you would like me to do that when offline, obviously, and happy to see what we can work out. But it would be unusual for a child who's been insecure to then be detached from social work support. So let me look into that.
So, I mean, the figures from the Scottish Association of Social Workers survey were pretty stark, and probably do speak to why we've got such a problem with retention, when 50% said they were dissatisfied and 32% said they were prone to emotional outbursts, including crying on a weekly basis. So the situation's pretty stark, and I can understand from that why there is such a leakage from the profession. So I really just want to try and get more information about the Joint Workforce Improvement Plan. How's that coming along?
Okay, so the Minister's talked about what we're doing around students and then what we're doing around support to newly qualified staff. What we need to do, so where we are with COSLA and our local government partners is, I'm hoping that there will be a report going to COSLA leaders next month, basically to look at that joint plan, and then we will also consult on our top strategic priorities. But the workforce is absolutely the top strategic priority for everybody. It's not a Scottish Government workforce, it's a local government workforce. So we need to work together. We've got the levers in terms of the education side, the social work side. We're also working with Skills Development Scotland to introduce a graduate apprenticeship, which means that lots of people with lots of experience, for example, social work assistants who've been doing the job in different contexts, will be able to apply to become graduate apprenticeships and be able to get qualified. But that's particularly important for remote and rural areas who can bring staff in on that basis and then train them and support them. We're also looking at how we develop a workforce plan. So we're doing a test of change with local government just now to look at how do you get a good workforce plan that captures the needs of all 32. Plus, we are talking to Sally and Kelly about the third sector as well. That then allows us to plan properly, because I know we're not in the best place in terms of that planning going forward. We know a lot more now than we did 3 or 4 years ago in terms of the workforce and what's happening and the movement of the workforce than we did. But we have still got solutions that we need to put in place. But we've been focused together around that. I think the National Social Work Agency and the partnership will then mean the more impetus towards that, and a formal agreement with local government around the priorities and how we're going to do it and who's going to do what. A clarity and making sure that we hold each other to account for the delivery of that, because it's their workforce, it's not ours, but we need to help them to be able to do it. We all know that not one of us has all the solutions and all the levers here, so we must do it in partnership.
So this is for the Minister, but you started off by saying we're on course. If I look at that, I don't think we're on course. I think we're way behind. We're 5 years into this programme, 8 years on from when the review started, and we're just talking about setting up these bodies and having these plans. Surely you can't say we're on course.
I believe we are on course, Mr Rainey. I appreciate, as I say, the pressures and the difficulties that we face. I would say, I believe I said in the statement, but you know, we have faced some significant barriers in terms of both the pandemic and the cost of living crisis. But that doesn't. I still believe that we are absolutely on course and will deliver the promise by 2030. And I think, you know, myself and Iona have both spoken to some of the moves that we're making in terms of supporting and retaining and adding to that social work workforce. But there are other things underway across government that I think will help to bolster and help to support that work. Iona said at the beginning, you know, obviously not the specific examples you gave yourself, Mr Rainey, but sometimes it may not be a social work interaction that is required. And I think that the work that we're doing around whole family support is absolutely instrumental. The priority that the First Minister has given that through the programme for government, because I think that will really allow us, as I say, you know, I don't need to rehearse the lines around prevention and getting to families earlier, but actually having an understanding of families' local needs in a specific areas and being able to get them to them at points before those crisis points, intervening at appropriate times, will definitely ease off the support that would be required in later years that might end up really quite intensive from a number of different organisations. So while I appreciate that that work is still ongoing, and I don't say it's for the long term, because we are taking action in that respect now, but I think we have to look across the board at a number of things that the government are doing that will help to deliver the promise over and above, you know, some of the very specifics around the workforce.
Before I move on to secure units, does Hampton? Yeah.
Brigson first, and any other member that wants to come in.
Thank you, Convener. I just wanted to ask the Minister, in terms of what should have been a National Care Service bill approach, that has been a disaster and is surely the reason why we do not now have a National Social Work Service up and running, doing the reforms we all wanted to see. So, you know, in the interest of honesty, surely that is where the government have failed to really progress what should have been progressed much early on in this Parliament. I'm not saying the Minister is responsible for that, but the National Care Service is where this sat and has failed to deliver. Is that not a clear understanding of why we don't see these reforms?
I think there have been difficulties with the National Care Service, of course. Obviously, I can't necessarily speak to those today. The National Care Service bill doesn't sit under me. And I appreciate what Mr Briggs is saying around the delays. I hope that we've assured him that action is still being brought forward and brought forward at pace to try to establish, well, not to try to establish the National Social Work Agency. I've spoken to some of the other areas, but I do agree that there were difficulties within the National Care Service that have or will impact on the promise. I think there was really compelling reasons for why reform of children's services should have been considered alongside that wider care reform. I think that that is something that would have really helped in terms of that multi-agency approach, joining up services, ensuring services are talking to each other. So I do agree there are a number of issues that may have been impacted by the National Care Service Bill, but I believe that we're still taking action forward to remedy those and taking that action forward at pace to try and get these changes implemented as quickly as possible.
But time to deliver and the timing of delivering the National Social Work Agency has been put back years because it sat in the National Care Service Bill. Two different ministers, but this has impacted, and clearly, and now we're at a midpoint of the promise being delivered. All the hard work around social work is just starting. And I think that's where, when I speak to social workers and the problems we face here in my own region, and especially in the capital, they have been waiting for that, and we're only now just seeing that progress at an end of a parliament, which I don't think is satisfactory. I think the government need to be honest with the sector, with people who we are now meeting, that this potentially is not going to be met by 2030 because we haven't done the work, or the government hasn't done the work.
So again, and I'll perhaps bring Iona in a second, but I disagree that the work on, sorry, Mr Briggs said that you said the work on social work is just starting, but that is not the case. The National Social Work Agency is, of course, one very important aspect in terms of our work to support the workforce. But myself and Iona both alluded to a number of other areas that are not the case that they're just starting. These have been being thought through and being worked and progressed through a number of years. So I appreciate the delays in relation to the National Care Service. I think there was difficulties coming from across the Parliament in relation to how we got that over the line. But as I say, all I can speak to is the work that we are doing, the work that we are progressing to make the changes that we need to see and support the workforce. Iona, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that in terms of timescale.
Sure. Just two things briefly. One is we are working at pace in terms of, certainly in terms of the students, certainly in terms of the newly qualified staff, and we're also discussing how we support the workforce in localities to make sure that they stay as social workers. So there's a lot of things there that just don't exist for social work that exist, say, for example, in the health professions. But the second thing I'd like to say is, 5 years on from the pandemic, we shouldn't underestimate the impact that's had, both in terms of the impact on children and young people, and I think what Chief Social, well, I know what, because I discussed it with Chief Social Work Officers last Thursday morning, basically is the levels of complexity that are out there in terms of the impact on children and young people, the levels of neurodiversity issues and the complexity around that interaction, particularly young women with eating disorders, a number of issues there that, for many of the Chief Social Work Officers, is you would have seen that level of complexity, but in less numbers. And now what they're saying is that there's very complex issues which require complex solutions in many ways, but also the impact that was had on the workforce. So we've seen people leave the workforce after the pandemic. So I just think that that's not something we could have foreseen. It's something that we've watched and we've known. I mean, and let's also recognise there's been a very significant reduction in the number of children in care. And the workforce understand the promise, they understand what we're trying to achieve, and many of them have gone the extra mile to try and do that. So I would like to say, that on record, many are doing the best that they possibly can here to fulfil the promise, and that we've seen transformation in certain areas, but against that difficult context and background.
George Adam.
Yep, thank you, Convener. Just a very quick question. There's much talk about delivery by 2030, and we were all attended the event I recently sponsored for the Oversight Board on their third report, and they stated, although the fact we're halfway, but we're not halfway to delivery, they also mentioned part of the reasons for that was the pandemic and the external other cost of living crisis and things like that as well. But they even have said in their third report that should we get the sleeves up and actually start to work and focus on this, we can deliver still by 2030. So is it not the case, Minister, if the people that are marking your homework are actually saying you can still do it, then you've still got a good chance of being able to get there?
Absolutely. And I think it really takes me back to the fact that we all have a responsibility in this. Government is working at pace to deliver on our aims and our priorities. And as I say, we have we need the effort from local authorities. We need the effort from a range of organisations from the third sector, and I know that it's there. People are absolutely committed to delivering on the promise. So yes, given some of the issues that we have faced that were unforeseen, such as the cost of living and the pandemic, that have undoubtedly had an impact, not just on our work in government, but also on people's living standards, on people's living situations. But yes, absolutely, I believe that if we all take the action that we need to take, and as I say, really drive forward the change and the progress that we want to see, we will deliver the promise. I'm not saying we can, we will deliver the promise by 2030.
Okay, thank you.
Pam Duncan-Glancy.
The extent to which staff are doing that extra mile to be able to do everything they possibly can, and I too thank them for everything that they're doing in that. Unison has said that staff are working evenings, taking work home, and they're burning out. This is not really an environment conducive to a trauma-informed approach. And so can I ask the Minister, what does she think about that comment, but also what engagement has she had with the trade unions, and can she commit to engaging them in the workforce plan on the promise going forward?
Yeah, I'll perhaps bring Iona in a second. Absolutely, trade unions are key partners. In fact, I had engagement with trade unions, I think, just last week in relation to some separate matters, not specifically this, but on some separate matters in relation to the promise. As I say, I think I'm sorry to hear the difficulties of some of those specific examples. As I say, I engage regularly with social workers myself, and I really have. I've alluded to a number of different moves that the government are making to try to support, to try to ensure that, because I know social workers are dealing with extremely difficult issues, extremely complex issues. As Iona has alluded to, they are absolutely committed to delivering on the promise, and I know sometimes that means that they go above and beyond their expected duties. I thank them for that commitment, and as I say, I really have set out the plan that I think going forward will help to both support the current workforce, but also gain or add to the workforce to ensure that there is a more even spread of or people aren't having to work those long hours, as you've alluded to. Iona, I don't know if you've got anything to add.
We are fully engaged, with Unison and with Scottish Association of Social Workers, you heard from Alison, I think. Unison, I've certainly been with them and spoken at some of their seminars. I've looked at the Workforce Charter. We've discussed it as part of our partnership discussions. And when we do our consultation on the top priorities for our strategy for the National Social Agency, I'm absolutely clear that Unison will be lobbying hard for all of the issues that they have in their charter. Their charter identifies some very significant issues, and you're absolutely right about staff having to work overtime and having to work at weekends, and we can't. That's not a sustainable position. So we need to work with our colleagues in local government to have proper workforce plans that can make sure that we can support the workforce to support the people that they need to support to get the best outcomes for them. So, absolutely, Unison are completely up the middle of this discussion.
Okay, thank you.
To Willie Rennie.
Yeah, so secure units. So the Children's Commissioner wrote to you on the 20th of February and was very concerned about what was described to her as cobbled together provision, because there wasn't sufficient capacity in the system, and also highlighting the two-tier system. If you go through the courts, then you're likely to get a place. If through the hearing system, you're not. So she asked you 3 questions in that letter for the meeting on the 13th of March. Are you able to give us the details of the answers to those questions? Do you want me to go over what those questions are?
If you could, please, Mr. Rennie.
So how many children in each of the last 6 months have been unable to be placed in secure care when a hearing authorised the placement and the CSWO determined that it was necessary? So that's the first one. Do you want to deal with that one first and we'll come to the other ones?
Sure. So I'll maybe bring Gavin in a second, but the Scottish Government does not collect data on the number of children from a hearings who are not allowed entry or are not able to enter into secure care. What I will say is that I know that, you know, if there was a child who needed entry into secure care and that space wasn't available, there are intense discussions to take place between COSLA, between the secure care centres, between all the relevant stakeholders, social work, etc., to try to ensure that what is carried out is in the best, is what is needed for the child, is what suits the child's needs.
So we don't have an answer to that one. Second one, what consideration is the Scottish Government giving to a national coordination of secure placements given the crisis this system is currently experiencing?
Well, there are some, so you will appreciate, Mr Vennie, I'm giving a statement this afternoon on secure care where I'm planning to give a little bit more detail on our response to the issues in relation to capacity that we've been seeing in secure care.
It's limited time we get for questioning individually. We get like 45 seconds. So yeah. I hope you don't mind giving us the answers. If we can.
No, of course. So that, as I say, discussions are continuing with COSLA in relation to our joint working in relation to secure care. I don't have plans to make what was the specific national referral?
No, it was the national coordination of secure placements.
Okay. So I'll bring Iona in a second, but there are a number of other areas or things that we are doing to try to improve the situation with secure care. That is not one of those considerations at the moment, because, as I say, based on the work that we are currently doing to overcome the capacity issues and the work that we have planned in terms of the future of secure care, I don't necessarily believe that that would be required.
Okay, what steps is the Scottish Government taking to ensure that sufficient secure beds of sufficient quality are available for the children who need them? And then when will this detailed information be available for the Scottish Parliament for their scrutiny?
The detailed information will be available this afternoon when I give it in my statement.
Okay.
I can assure the member that every appropriate action has been being taken to support the secure accommodation providers with the issues that they are facing with capacity. Obviously, there has been issues in relation to St Mary's. Those that has now been lifted. I was out to visit St Mary's a couple of weeks ago and really to see the improvements and understand what has taken place. There are other areas that we're looking at in terms of increasing capacity, in terms of working with COSLA, and as I say, I'm more than happy to provide more detail on that in my statement this afternoon.
So, I was on this committee when you gave evidence from the Children Care and Experience Bill, and you promised us that this would not be an issue and there would be sufficient capacity.
Yeah.
And that's not happened.
I am sorry that that has not happened, but what I would say is that this issue with capacity is not a result of the legislative change that was brought in through the Care and Justice Act. There are various issues. St Mary's, for one, has contributed to it. That was unknown to me at the time. There is an increasing rise in the complexity of cases and the support required, which sometimes means that not all beds are able to be utilised because one child may require more than one bed or more than one space. There has been obviously ongoing discussions around cross-border placements. There are a number of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. There are a number of issues that have related to this.
All of those things were possible. Unexpected things are possible. But you promised us this would not be an issue, and it has been an issue. Surely you have contingencies. Surely you have additional capacity to cope with the unexpected. Why was that not put in place?
Well, as I said, those are the conversations that we've been having. I think the situation at St Mary's was really, as you say, Mr Rennie, of course, those situations could still arise. We don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. I did sit here and I said that...
So you didn't have contingencies?
As a result...
No contingencies for events like this? Nothing?
So,
no contingencies.
as a result of the Care and Justice Act that was brought in, the capacity challenges, sorry, are not a result of that. And that is when I was sitting here saying
I never
to
said
you,
that. I'm just saying you promised it wouldn't be a problem, and it is a problem, and you didn't have any contingencies. That is clear, because if you had contingencies, we wouldn't be asking these questions today.
well, I'm going to provide a full update on the contingency measures and the discussions that have taken place and the actions that are being taken to ensure that this does not happen again.
Yeah, for those young people who need secure care, it's not really good enough. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. John Mason.
Thanks, Convener.
John Mason. Sorry, the other microphone, please, for John Mason.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Convener. Yes, to move on to something else, foster care, foster families and so on, which has always been something I've had a huge admiration for and felt has been very useful and successful. I know there's been the odd mishap along the way, but when I was a councillor, which is now, I'm afraid, about 20 years ago, Glasgow struggled to get enough foster families, and there was a financial side to it, and then sometimes when they could find a family, the family was quite a long way away, and that became an issue as well. So I just wonder what's your overall thinking at the moment about foster care, foster families. I understand the numbers are down 2020 from 3,500 odd to under 3,000 in 2023. So have we got a big challenge there, or what's happening?
I know there are challenges in relation to foster care. We obviously have already alluded to the consultation that we've undertaken around foster care, and that is to ensure that foster carers are supported in the way that they need to be and ensure that foster care is fit for the 21st century. So we had a fair amount of responses for the consultation, and we've also undertook really extensive engagement as well with foster carers. Much of that I have been out with foster carers and spoken to them on a regular basis. In fact, I was just out a couple of weeks ago at one of the engagement events following the consultation over in Renfrewshire, and heard about the challenges that foster carers face regularly. So, as I've said, independent analysis around the actual consultation itself is currently underway. The consultation, as I say, set out a vision for the future of foster care, really sort of honing in on the support that is required and the unique skills and qualities of foster carers. Now, as well as the consultation, I've also been out and I've heard and witnessed different models of foster care that are happening in our communities. So, for example, just several weeks ago, I was out at Bernardo's. I heard about a really innovative model that they're trialling called Mockingbird, and that looks to provide a sort of extended support to foster families, so a sort of community for that foster family. And I heard directly from the foster families, care experienced young people and the members of staff who were there that day about how really transformational this had been in terms of their way of working and the support that they felt like they had. So that's something that I'm looking into and forms part of my response to the consultation and forms part of, as I say, my working form in the bill. In relation to recruitment and retention, I absolutely agree or appreciate that this is an issue. We are funding a national foster care recruitment campaign to try to drive up the numbers of foster care. I think that, coupled with the work that we're doing or the work that will follow following the consultation, will be instrumental in providing the right support and the right avenues for people to enter into foster care and ensure, loving homes for our children and young people.
And do you think the falling number, is it because of finance that people can't afford to do it, or is there too much bureaucracy, or is it just a mixture of different things?
So when I speak to foster carers, I hear some of the challenges. Again, I think they're dealing with quite complex, an increasing number of really complex issues. I understand that finances are also an issue. That is something that obviously the Scottish Government is taking action through the Scottish Recommended Allowance, but appreciating that there will be there may still be concerns around that. However, what I hear loud and clear when I'm out with both foster and kinship carers, although money is of course important and I'm not downplaying that, It is the support, it's the wraparound support, I think, that's most important, and it's ensuring that we get that right. You know, having somebody to pick up the phone to when there's a problem, having respite, things like that are very, very important, and that's some of the issues that we're looking at to inform, as I say, following the consultation and to inform the bill.
I mean, obviously, kinship care is much higher profile than it used to be, and that's a good thing. Is there a sense that more kids are now in kinship care and therefore fewer are needing foster care, or are the two not related?
So for me, I think, you know, part of the basis of the promise is to keep children at home where it's safe to do so. But of course, and if that is not possible, I would say that the next best place, as long as it's safe and a loving environment for them, would be with their family. So I am absolutely, you know, I promote kinship care. I think it's very, very important and absolutely instrumental in terms of our aims in delivering the promise. I have had, I've met with kinship carers. I was out in Western Bartonshire just last week with kinship carers. I've had some very challenging conversations with them who also feel that there is a lack of support for them. Again, finances can be difficult, but I would really say that although that's important, it always comes back to that need for wider support from local authorities, the understanding that just because a child is placed with their family doesn't mean that everything's okay, that there could still be very complex issues, and equally that carer, for example, they may be elderly, they may have different things or needs, so it's really about ensuring that that we're wrapping support around those families, because at the end of the day, if a child is staying in a kinship care arrangement, then, you know, they're not going to be going through a lot of other organisations and other responses that would be required to help that child if they're staying with family.
Okay. I think with foster caring, one of the issues in the past has been we didn't have a lot of ethnic minority families doing fostering. Has that changed, or what's your feeling about that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I probably have to turn to officials for a level of detail on that. But I appreciate the member's point. I think it's really important, and I think that will be part of the recruitment campaign, is really ensuring that we can recruit a diverse range of foster carers to suit all children's needs. Gavin?
Yes, Mr Mason. I mean, that's been a historic issue, as you'll know. Part of the campaign, of course, is going to seek to promote foster care with ethnic minority families. As you alluded to as well, the balance between foster care and kinship care is changing. And last year, for the first time, kinship care placements exceeded foster care placements. And so, of course, if we are talking about kinship care placements for ethnic minority families, that's more often likely to be with their families, as opposed to, you know, in a different culture and environment.
Okay, thanks. And the kind of final thing I wanted to touch on, I mean, clearly, if somebody has a relationship with a foster family or kinship care, that will continue no matter what age they are, or it may continue no matter what age they are, and I know in some cases it has. Now, on Monday night, some of us met online with some young care-experienced people, of a variety of ages, it has to be said, and one of the issues that came up, it was Pam Duncan-Glancy and myself were in the same group, was this cut off at 26. And, you know, I think a lot of foster families, a lot of kinship care wouldn't have a sharp cut off at 26, but other parts of the care sector maybe do. Is that something we can address, or has there just got to be an age somewhere that we draw the line?
I think that comes back to my point that I was making earlier around that kind of lifelong support and, you know, the need to ensure that people with care experience can access support wherever they require. I imagine that's maybe a little bit different to what Mr Mason's talking about around, you know, if a child has been with a foster family or a kinship family, they will likely have built up a relationship. In fact, I've witnessed this on many occasions. That might not be quite as easy to do, although actually I visited a residential home just a few weeks ago, and they were speaking to me about how they had built relationships. It was quite a small home, so there wasn't too many children who were in it at one time. So the ability to build and form relationships with those children and young people was really strong. And actually, I'd heard examples of the children and young people coming back, actually, you know, interacting with, you know, children and young people who were there. And so I guess that kind of presents what Mr Mason is referring to in terms of those kind of lifelong building relationships, but equally in terms of support, that's another angle, and that's something that I'm looking into in terms of ensuring people can get the support when they need it, no matter what age they are.
Okay, thanks, Convener.
Miles Briggs.
I wanted to follow on that line of questioning in relation to the differences we're seeing between kinship care and fostering and opportunities. Now, we know that we're seeing a loss of foster carers, I think 8% lost last year. In Edinburgh, there's a very specific lack of foster carers coming forward as well. And I think looking back at the Stirling University report, which was published in September of last year, that's pointing to quite stark implications of this, and concerningly, 1 in 10 children have now had 5 or more placements, and 10 years after becoming looked after, more than 1 in 10 children are still in impermanent placements. So can I ask the Minister specifically in relation to what work has been undertaken to assess the impact of the different payments and support available for foster care and for kinship care? And for argument's sake, if I fostered someone today in Edinburgh, I would be entitled to £25,000 in support. If I was to take in a family member under kinship care arrangements, that would drop to £8,752. So there's clearly a very different system in place. And what work's being undertaken to look towards what would be at the heart of the promise in terms of supporting extended family to look after someone, and why that's not actually been matched to date?
So,
a long question there, but I wanted to describe where I wanted to go.
I'll do my best. So, as I said in my previous answer, I fully appreciate the issues that kinship carers have brought to me. Very challenging, and I appreciate, as I said, I know that kinship carers don't feel like they are necessarily getting the financial support. They feel like there's a discrepancy there. In terms of the Scottish Recommended Allowance, we are carrying out a review on the Scottish Recommended Allowance. Now, I brought that forward because I felt that that was really important to do so, again, because of some of the challenges I'm hearing around that. In terms of that, the sort of wider picture, I know there are also problems in relation to kinship carers being able to access benefits and things like that. We have ensured that in Scotland that is not the case, but I know with things like universal credit, there are problems in the UK benefit system recognising kinship care. So that's something that I am continuing to engage with UK counterparts on, that I know my officials have been in discussions with, to try and ensure that kinship carers are able to get at least what they're entitled to. But I hear Mr Briggs' calls in terms of, I believe he says that even with that, it may not be sufficient in terms of their needs. And that is something that I have, as I say, discussed with kinship carers, and it is something that I'm looking at, not strictly financially, because I think the support piece is very important too. You know, I've spoken to kinship carers, as I say, who are elderly, who haven't looked after a child in a long time, and their support needs are a little bit different to other families. Every family is different, every family is complex, and I think, again, just sometimes, from what I've heard, they can feel a little bit abandoned, and I think that is something that we absolutely need to combat. So, looking at both the financial aspects and that support, that is also something that I'm looking to for the Promise Bill as well.
Would that therefore be putting them on the same legal footing so that people would be entitled to the support? You know, what I find ridiculous is we're desperate for foster families here in the capital, but we have grandparents who don't necessarily have the financial means to then sustain one of these children. And I don't understand why we haven't corrected that, to say if the resource is there in a fostering capacity, why is it not there at the same level for kinship care, and for the priority to be that young person getting the best outcome? So just wondered, is it because of that different legal footing for kinship care that that's not already happened?
I mean, I believe there are Mr Briggs will be aware that there are inconsistencies in kinship care itself, where some kinship carers are entitled to and some are not. So I think over and above the disparity between kinship and foster that you allude to, there are also the issues around kinship carers themselves and what they are entitled to. So I think there are issues around definitions and legal matters around that, and as I say, that is something that I'm looking into in terms of how we can best support kinship carers, because I do believe they are fundamental in our delivery of the promise.
Okay, thanks. And that's something I'd like to see the detail once we get the bill. A number of witnesses have told the committee that children and family social work has a negative public perception, and a number of kinship carers have similarly expressed these concerns to me in relation to social work. A lot of that is around stigma, suspicion of reports, really a concern over children being taken into care of them in a kinship care setting. So I wondered, has the government captured that as part of the bill, and that suspicion around social work, and what plans, for example, it was suggested to us this might be putting off people going into social work, and whether or not there is measures such as a recruitment campaign might be used to address some of these concerns.
So I've certainly heard those concerns before. It's something I'm very aware of. In terms, I'll perhaps bring Iona in a second, because I appreciate the members' points in terms of the messaging that we could convey in terms of that. It's not something that's strictly in relation to the Promise Bill, but it's certainly something that we can continue to work on. I would say, I think it probably brings me back to some of the points Iona's made around experience and ensuring that social workers have the experience that they require entering into the role, or can have people to draw from around that experience. Iona, I don't know if you've got anything to add in terms of the recruitment.
Sure. We're doing some work together with the partners, particularly with SASWA, but also Unison, to look at the issues that you're raising. The reality is, so there's a bit, and I think you would have heard from Alison Babbage, one of the issues is social work has that, in many areas, has that negative image, because social workers they don't have powers. They make recommendations to the legal bodies. Social workers themselves have very little power in that sense, but they have power in terms of the recommendations that they make to the Sheriff Court, to the Children's Hearing, to the Mental Health Tribunal, to the Parole Board, whoever. So that is a reality, and they are asked to make those assessments on behalf of us all, basically. Because the key thing here about the delivery of the promise is that we want the promise to be delivered safely. We don't want children to be left in difficult situations where they may experience harm. But we are working with our partners to look at how we present a more positive image, which is about how social workers support people, basically, to get the best outcomes that they possibly can. And that is the case in many, many instances. Where, and I know you've all been talking to a lot of young people with care experience, and I've no doubt that some of those young people will have told you about the social workers who've been really important, or the residential staff particularly, who've been really important in terms of supporting them. And I've seen some really good examples as well, where we've seen, I was in South Ayrshire last week for World Social Work Day, and saw some great examples where social workers working with foster carers and to support families with huge complexity. So there's a lot of really good work going on there. So we are looking at how do we bring forward that, but we can't duck the issue. We are asked to make recommendations to the panel, to the Sheriff Court, about whether or not people should be able to continue with the care of their children, whether or not somebody should go to prison. All of those things are realities of the job, and sometimes they make it difficult, but also they're necessary.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Carmina.
I'm going to come on second to ask a couple of questions about the whole family wellbeing fund, but is it all right, please, if I just go back slightly, well, a wee while now, to a question that was asked earlier in terms of social work support for young people and you know, the delivery of that and how they feel about it. On the basis of, as was mentioned earlier, we did have an online meeting with some young people across the country, and one young man actually did raise the fact that he was dissatisfied with the social worker who was dealing with him, not because of anything that they did right or wrong, but because they weren't always available. And apparently, according to what we were told, the social worker had been unavailable for anything up to 2 months, but there was nobody had been appointed to take their place during that period. On that basis, is there something that this young man or whoever supports him locally could actually do in order to try and address that problem?
I think obviously some of what we've been discussing today around the measures will help in terms of the longer term impact. That might not help the specific person, young person that you were speaking to. I think if we would be happy to pick discussions up about individual cases, perhaps not in committee time, so you're more than welcome to follow that up if you'd like to do so.
Okay. Well, that's extremely helpful. Thank you very much indeed. And I know it's a difficult thing because I'm not having to go at social workers or anything. It's just that sometimes situations can cause a difficulty. Anyway, well, to go back to the Whole Family Wellbeing Fund, the committee has heard about the need for longer-term funding and funding certainty. We've heard this from those involved in delivering whole family support projects. Can I ask what, and I have sort of mentioned it earlier, but what's consideration of the Scottish Government given to this certainty, and how might this be addressed, please?
We have given it. We have given a multi-year commitment to the Whole Family Wellbeing Funding. We've also increased that funding to Children's Service Planning Partnerships by £6.1 million this year. So, as well as providing an increase in funding, we have also given that certainty in terms of multi-year funding, which I know, having discussed with Children's Service Planning Partnerships, that this is absolutely instrumental when we're asking for, you know, organisations to make transformational change on the ground that's going to be long-lasting, that's going to have a long-lasting impact. Then I can completely understand the need to have some certainty around the finances to ensure, you know, certainty around, for example, staff and programmes of work and things like that. So I believe that was very well received.
Good. Well, thank you. And on that will, I mean, I do understand what you're saying, but this will provide transition support to organisations who are continuing with the Whole Family Wellbeing Fund, then? The transition from the position they're in going forward?
Absolutely, because the Whole Family Wellbeing Funding is just that. It's to create transformational change. It's to create new ways of doing things, to enable local authorities or CSPPs to really, I think, revolutionise the way they are providing services. And again, you won't be surprised to hear, I've been out, I've visited, and I've heard about some of the ways that some of the impacts that these new ways of working have really had in terms of breaking down silos, breaking down barriers between different departments in government, and really, as I say, helping to ensure and of course work through our third sector as well, which has been really key. So I'm very positive about the work that we're seeing through the Whole Family Wellbeing Funding, and yeah.
And that will be helping to cover the timescales within which people are being able to deliver and maybe transition completely?
I believe so. I mean, I appreciate there are some difficulties, and I know some local areas are finding it a little bit more complex than others, but I think that actually comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning in terms of the Promise Progress framework and sharing best practice across the country. Sometimes things seem too difficult until you see how other people are doing it, and then I think that can have really big impacts. So, as I say, there are really positive things going on. We still have a way to go in terms of really enacting that transformational change, but I know that it's happening, and I've seen some of the benefits that it's having already.
Well, thank you very much for that. Thank you, Convener.
Ricky Dunbar.
Thank you. Good morning, Minister.
Morning.
Jackie Dunbar. Yep.
Yeah, I know it was me. My microphone wasn't on, John. Good morning, Minister. Witnesses involved in whole family support projects have told the committee that in some cases they are supporting families where a child, the child's timetable is in school could be just 15 minutes a day or a few hours a day instead of the alternative of being excluded. I know in my own mailbox I've got a few inquiries from parents and carers who are looking after children in this situation and are desperate to ensure that they receive the help and the education that they need. Can you maybe go into detail about what can be done to resolve the issue of having children with shortened timetables in lieu of exclusion so that every child is given the best possible start in life?
Yeah, of course, Ms Dunbar. So I think we obviously need to understand that to support a child or young person who might have been out of school for, days, months, we appropriately and really, enhance the transition and back into school. That in exceptional circumstances, it may be that a part-time timetable or flexible approach might be needed. But I think I and the Scottish Government have been very clear that part-time timetables when returning from exclusion should only be short-term. This should not be for long periods of time because, as I say, this is really in an effort to transition children and young people back into school. So when that is taking place, as I say, it should be short-term, it should be within a defined period and with aims and conditions recorded in a plan that will allow for that child to transition back into the school day.
So if I can maybe just come back. So if a child does have that shortened timetable, should the parent or carer expect a plan to be drawn up by the local authority to show where they plan to go to? And should that be happening at the beginning or...?
I believe that should be happening at the beginning. I believe there should be an understanding of how long that would be taking place, of whether, a 15 minutes growing to an hour, growing to 3, whatever it may be that's right for that child. So I believe that that plan should be in place for that child to ensure that the kind of journey of travel back to the school day. And actually, I know in many cases where that's happening, again, going back to the virtual schools and the virtual head teachers, I know, and I've spoken to children who have made that transition back into school. But a plan, I believe, is important to ensure that it's effective and that everybody knows what's expected of them.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Minister, what's your view on care-experienced young people and children being excluded from school?
That it should only be a last resort and that other measures should be taken to support that child or find out what it is that's happening in that child's life that is causing the reason that they would be excluded. But I believe it should be, as I say, as a last resort.
But the promise says it should end.
Well, as I say, we're working in progress towards supporting children and young people, supporting them in their school day. We are experiencing a number of issues in our schools. The member will be aware. The Cabinet Secretary just launched the Relationship and Behaviour Action Plan. So I think there are a number of actions that we are taking to try to reduce exclusions. And yes, if the promise says that we are to end exclusions, that will have to be the case to deliver on the promise by 2030.
It says end both formal and informal exclusions from education.
And what I'm saying is I would encourage head teachers to, look at every other solution, whether that may be things like part-time tables or, removing children from the school, but equally still ensuring that they are able to have an education and transitioning them back into school. I don't believe that exclusions...
Do you think it should end completely, or it should be a last resort and therefore care-experienced children should still be excluded?
In order to deliver on the promise, then it will need to end.
How do local authorities respond to that? What discussions have you had with local authorities about that?
So again, I probably have been discussing things like this with virtual heads, teachers and virtual schools rather than local authorities themselves. I put that it would be the Cabinet Secretary who would discuss matters of attendance and issues around that with COSLA. I'm more than happy to take that away. But like I've said, I believe that there is support in place, that a school should look to support the pupil, understand the reasons for their behaviour or whatever it is that's leading to them being considered to be excluded, and that all possible avenues should be explored before that decision is made.
Are you aware of the paper going to North Ayrshire Council today?
No, sorry, Mr. Ross.
So they're looking at exemptions for care experienced learners from the policy on school exclusion, and the recommendation from officers to council is that the option to exclude from school as a last resort should be retained. That would be contrary to what the promise seeks to do. So right now, today, on the 26th of March 2025, we have local authorities in Scotland who are urging, this is council officers writing this paper to urge councillors to support a policy that wouldn't be in line with the promise.
Well, I imagine as we work to deliver the promise and we provide appropriate support for children and young people, we keep more children at home, that more children would have less reason to act out or act in a behaviour that would mean that they would be excluded from school. So I think this goes along in line with our work to deliver on the aims of the promise. However, I am not aware of the council paper that Mr Ross, that you've brought to me, convener. I'm more than happy to go away and look at that and, you know, discuss that with officials and look into what action can be taken around that.
But does it not go back to the point that several members have been making about the progress of the promise? If you're saying there's good progress and things are working and we're going to get to a stage where the promise is delivered, that, you know, years on from the promise, the inception of the promise, local authorities are still coming up with policies that would be contrary to it?
Well, I think it goes back to my position around inconsistencies with local authorities and the need to really drive best practice forward across all 32. So if discussions, you know, have to be had around how best to enact practice around exclusions, then that's something that can absolutely be taken forward. So I think, you know, we're 2025, there is still a way to go. And
do you think North Ayrshire Council would be wrong to approve this paper today?
I haven't seen the paper, Mr Ross, so I'm not going to say yes or no.
Would you be wrong to approve that recommendation? Because I can read the recommendation. Approves the recommendation that the option to exclude from school as a last resort should be retained. I'm sorry, Mr Ross, but I don't know the context behind it, so I'm not going to give you a yes or no answer. But I have assured you that I will go away and look at it. I don't believe it fits with the ethos of the promise, and I will, as I say, if conversations or discussions need to be had around this, I will absolutely have them. Mr Henderson, do you want to say anything? No. Willie Rennie.
Did you know what the promise said on this?
Yes.
Because you just said earlier that it's a last resort and then you changed your mind to being never. So
no.
Why did you change your mind?
I said a last resort at the moment. I believe that the work that we are carrying out, I believe that the work that we are carrying out to deliver on the aims of the promise in terms of supporting children and young people will lead to children and young people having happier lives. I believe that the work that we're undertaking to tackle poverty will lead to children and young people having happier lives, and I would hope that by 2030, when we are supposed to have delivered on the promise, that there will be less reasons for children to behave in ways that would see them excluded from school. There are other reasons that children are not in school over and above behaviour, though. Those need to be considered too. And as I say, that's something that I'm considering further work on as a result of this discussion.
Right, okay. There was a lot of words there. But what I was really just asking is, you didn't seem to be aware of what the promise said. I think that was pretty obvious to everybody.
Well, I was, Mr Rennie, so sorry, you are incorrect on that point.
I will ask you to review the official record and the recording of this, because I had to read out the promise to you, because without any prompting from me, you used the words "the last resort." So I would welcome the opportunity for you to review the official record of today's meeting and the recording of the meeting to see if perhaps it could be, because I certainly took a similar opinion to Mr Rennie, that it sounded like you thought the promise suggested as a last resort. And that's maybe why councils are doing this, if that's the guidance they're getting from the top. But back to Mr Rennie.
You will have seen or heard or read the evidence that some third sector organisations gave to us about the 15-minute timetable. And the indication was from them very clearly that that was all those young people were getting, was just the 15 minutes in some cases. Did you speak to those charities to find out more about their evidence?
I haven't spoken to them directly on this issue, but I'm more than happy to do so.
Okay. That was pretty stark evidence, and if I was the Minister, I would be straight on the phone, and I would want to know why the 15-minute timetable was used as a dodge to make sure there was no exclusions. Because a 15-minute timetable with no wraparound support is a dodge. So why did you not phone them?
I can actually bring my officials in a second to speak to any further engagement that may have taken place. But, Mr Rennie, there are a number of things that cross my desk on a daily basis that I would have to say are at times decisions for either local schools or local authorities to make that I can't necessarily have a direct impact on if that is a decision that has been taken. I, as the Government Minister, you know, I am here to direct policy. I am here to try and, of course, convey the ethos of the promise and ensure that local authorities are signed up to. I think we've actually heard here today very clearly that there is a real drive from local authorities, from the third sector, from a number of organisations in terms of delivering the promise. So as I say, I've been very clear about my thinking around 15-minute timetables, about how they should be used as a transition to go back into school. But I am more than happy to have further discussions on these matters.
Has anybody phoned them?
Gavin, would you like to?
So this is something that we can engage with our education colleagues and maybe write to the committee.
Okay. So as far as we're aware, in preparation for this evidence session, a pretty critical piece of evidence that was given to us in a previous session has not been followed up, even though it's central to the exclusion policy, which I don't think you were very clear on, but nevertheless. So it doesn't inspire us with confidence that you're really on top of this.
Well, I'm sorry that that is the impression you've got, Mr Rennie, but, you know, as I say, there are a number of wide-ranging aspects in the promise, and I really have nothing further to say. I think I've been very clear in my priority and my emphasis in driving this forward. And I will pick up those further conversations. As I've been very clear, keeping the promise is a cross-portfolio approach, and we have a responsibility from education, we have a responsibility from housing, we have a responsibility from health, justice, a number of areas. And of course, I will absolutely look into the concerns around this specific case, but, you know, it is for us all in government to drive forward the changes that are required to deliver on the promise.
Okay.
Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Convener. It is a cross-government commitment, of course, and we heard this morning about the bill and discussions at Cabinet. So can I ask the Minister, what discussion has she had with the Education Secretary about the issue of exclusions and young care experience education, and when did she last discuss it?
Formally, I would not have that information at the moment, but I can assure the member that that is something that I discuss regularly with the Cabinet Secretary.
How recently, roughly?
I can come back to the member with that information, if you like.
Okay, that'd be helpful, because the outcomes for looked after children and young people in education last year were published, of course, without much attention drawn to it.
In fact, I can give the member, I last discussed the issue of attendance on the record with the Cabinet Secretary last Thursday during a portfolio call.
Last Thursday, on attendance and specifically on care experience young people?
On attendance and specifically on care experience, and actually I think the discussion went into virtual schools and the virtual head teacher network as well.
And in that call, did you together discuss the outcomes that showed less than half of young people with care experience have even one National 5 upon leaving school, several times less likely to be able to access higher education, even less likely to know what they're doing when they leave school, and that numbers are getting worse? So
we didn't discuss that in that exact call, but as I say, I've discussed that previously with the Cabinet Secretary, and the member will be aware that work is underway with Education Scotland, with COSLA and with ADES to really develop and agree meaningful outcomes in relation to the education asked within the promise. So that is something that we are working on. I appreciate the concerns around those statistics, but please be assured that those conversations are taking place.
And are similar conversations happening with the Minister for Further and Higher Education?
In relation to? the outcomes. Absolutely. The Minister for Further and Higher Education was involved in that call too.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Convener. Just to follow on Jackie Dunbar's questioning about the whole family support, I was just wondering, do you feel it's consistent across the country? Because, for example, I would have a school in my area where quite a number of families don't have a close relationship with the school, and the school has used PEF money to bring in the third sector and to build up that relationship with families. And then obviously social work are involved as well, and they are sometimes taking a child out of school class because they need to speak to them about whatever. Do you feel that the approach nationally is joined up enough, or is it better that we just leave it to the individual situations to do the whole family support the way they see best?
No, I don't think it's joined up enough at the moment, and I think that's part of the First Minister's priority to this. I think, you know, really ensuring that there is more of an understanding on how to implement this at a local level, and that understanding is national to ensure that there isn't that inconsistency in practice. The most recent budget set out the next steps towards our commitment to introducing more flexibility in how key services can be both designed, funded and delivered. So I think, as Mr Mason points out, there are inconsistencies there, but that work is really being driven forward to try to improve that and to try to improve things at a local level.
I mean, the good thing about the PEF money, I accept that's not exactly your remit, but I mean, it allows the local situation, the local head teacher in that case, to really focus resources on where they feel they're most needed. So would that be something you'd like to see continuing, that, you know, we have resources in the neediest areas?
Of course.
Yes. Okay, thanks, Convener.
Okay. Rose McCall.
Thank you, thank you, Convener, and thank you, Committee, for letting me come along today. Minister, thank you very much indeed for the answers. It's been very interesting. I'm sure the care community will be very relieved to hear the Minister, in a response to Mr Adam, that definitively state that the promise will be met by 2030. I'm looking forward to that. My questions are on the redesign of the children's hearing system. The report published in February of the analysis of the responses said that 74% of the people responding think that there should be a paid position when it comes to the redevelopment. And that was in the 500 hours of consultation and the 12 sessions that the young people got involved in right at the beginning. So, is there going to be a paid position in the redesign of the children's hearing system?
So there are a number of options that I was presented with in relation to that specific ask. I personally think that some form of remuneration will be required to ensure the robustness of that system going forward, and that's something that, as I say, I'm considering for the bill.
Okay, so thank you. So that's something that you're definitely considering. That's good to hear, because we've already heard earlier that relationships are really important when it comes to the care experience community, and how essential that will be to have that continuity. But is it following the format that has been laid out by the Promise board in their process, or is it some form of? Any additional information you can give us on that?
I don't know if, Gavin, you have any detail on that right just now.
So I think these are issues that the Minister is considering for the conclusion in the bill.
Yeah, I think my concern comes from the fact that even though the Minister has already stated that the issues that we have in secure care are not related to the Care and Justice Act, we know that the legal process is utilising the care facilities as a sort of young offenders light, and that process is squashing the problem and why we have the issues in the care facility. I'm looking forward to the statement later on, and I don't want to preempt any of that. But any delays in coming forward with the revamp of the hearing process is adding to that concern. So how smooth a process are we looking at this when it comes to the bill? We've already had questions earlier on that we don't really have any time frame as to when the bill will be coming forward, but we do have an assurance that it will be coming later on this year. So how smooth a process are we going to be having here? What recommendations are being accepted from the Promise and are being carried forward in the bill when it comes to the hearing system?
So I can give you that detail when the details of the bill are produced, Ms McCall, but I can't go into that level of detail at the moment while these things are still being considered and certain aspects are still being worked out with law officers and going through the regular process. So that's something that I would have to update you on at a later date. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, and I accept that. I'm just very nervous that any delay on this design will be having a knock-on effect to children right now. So I look forward to any updates that you can give us on this process, and any time frame on the bill would be greatly appreciated. And, Convener, if I could just ask one last question on the definition of care experience. It's not been mentioned at all today, but it is a very important part of this process. If we don't have it clearly defined, how do we know that we are actually doing the job correctly for our young people? Where are we on the definition of care experience? Does it include adoption, and how will that affect adult adoptees?
So obviously that was something else that we had consulted on. We are still analysing the responses to that. I think what was very clear was people wanted quite a broad definition of care experience that encapsulated the really vast range of different experiences that people with experience of care can have had in their lives. I think it will be fundamental in terms of, you know, there's aspects of access to services and things like that are reliant on care experience. But I'll perhaps bring Gavin in to allude to a little more on the work that has been ongoing since the consultation closed.
Yes, Ms McCall. So this is obviously something we're considering for the bill, and something that the care community have asked for via the promise. At the moment, we don't have any definition in statute of care experience, and there's an element of that the care community asking for validation of that status and understanding as to what then flows from it and what's the package of support that the state's going to provide you if you have experienced these circumstances. Mm-hmm. So we really understand not just the important support just having a definition in law might give young people, but also then what that means in terms of how we're going to support people.
I'm sorry, Mr Henderson, I know I'm coming back on that. I understand why we need a definition. I'm wanting to find out how we are progressing with that definition. Will it include adoption, and will that move on to adult adoptees?
So we're looking at that for the bill, and we'll announce that when the bill is introduced.
Okay, thank you. No more questions.
And Miles Briggs.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask the Minister, in terms of the principles of good transition, how that will also potentially be included in the bill. We have heard from a number of individuals who have highlighted the compulsory supervision orders, and at 16, many councils deciding with that individual that they will be lifted, and then therefore support which is available not being made available, and that being a very cliff edge moment for someone at 16. And just wondered, in terms of the opportunities this bill has to look at these principles, and that actually the age specific of 16 being reconsidered as a part of the bill. And I do have my concern that in many cases councils have been using this to reduce caseload and ultimately to save money as well at this moment in time.
Well, it's disappointing, and I would hope that decisions aren't being made at a local level to save money when they are when they will directly impact on the promise. And like I've been very clear, I think if we are to deliver on the aims of the promise, then there will be a huge saving for local authorities at the end of the day. So I would really hope, as I say, that those decisions aren't being taken on a financial basis. In relation to aftercare and support for care experienced children, young people, as I've said, we're considering that aspects of that for the bill through things like aftercare, through advocacy. So as I say, that is forming part of consideration for the bill.
And would that include, if someone does go down this pathway and has a CSO lifted, that they could appeal and actually go back in and to support?
Gavin, could you?
So there's a range of options about what the right support is for young people. And of course, compulsory supervision order may be terminated for good reason. but the circumstances may change as a young person moves on. And of course, their circumstances don't change just because they turn 16, as I think you're alluding to. So the question is then, how do we provide the avenues to get the right support for young people, even if they are over 16? The answer may not be to reimpose a compulsory supervision order, but there are a range of different options the Minister is considering for the bill in relation to this.
Okay, look forward to seeing the detail of those. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes our evidence on the promise, but just since we have you here, there's a couple of other points I'd like to raise with you. Can I ask, Minister, do you respect this committee?
Of course I do. I respect this Parliament.
Okay. We are more than 7 weeks on from the Stage 1 report on the Outdoor Education Bill being presented to Government for your response, and we're a day away from a parliamentary debate and vote on Stage 1. Why have you not even responded to our report?
I will respond to your report. I am still considering the bill itself. I appreciate we are a day away from the debate. I met with Liz Smith last week to discuss our ongoing concerns around the bill, and I will respond to the committee in due course.
But concerns about the bill are included in the Stage 1 report. It wouldn't prevent you from responding to this committee's work, and those who took time to give evidence, both orally and written submissions. I don't believe it's in any way respectful, not just to the members sitting around this table, but everyone who has been involved in that bill, the member in charge, the Non-Government Bills Unit, and crucially the people who gave evidence, that the Government are still, more than 7 weeks after you were given the report, unable to tell us your response to that bill. And do you honestly believe it allows for a good debate tomorrow to be coming so late in the day with your response?
I believe that...
You think we'll have a good debate tomorrow with potentially less than 24 hours notice of the Government's response to this committee's Stage 1 report?
I believe we will have a good debate tomorrow, and I will, as I say,
Sorry, Minister,
respond...
do you think this is funny?
No, I don't think it's funny, Mr Ross, because you're saying that I have shown disrespect for the committee, whereas I think, you know, your own level of respect could be called into question as well. I am here to answer questions on the promise. I'm not, as I say, and the session has gone over 55, nearly an hour over time.
No,
I have plenty of respect.
Minister, we are 9 minutes over. You were scheduled to be here until 11:15 today.
Well, that is a miscommunication then, because I was under the impression I was here until 10:30 today, because I have another engagement that I am now late for.
I'm simply asking you, do you think it's respectful that over 7 weeks after you were given our report, you have still not responded to it? Is that respectful?
I apologise if you feel that it is disrespectful that I have not responded to that report, but I will respond, as I say, as soon as I am able to.
But the debate starts at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
I don't have anything further to say, Mr Ross.
So we'll get it between 11:25 on Wednesday and 2:30 on Thursday. OK, that concludes this session. Can I thank you and your officials for your evidence this morning? I will suspend the meeting briefly to allow our witnesses to leave and the committee to move into private session to consider its final agenda items.